Welcome to Magnify Your Message. Inspiration magnified.
But even if I fail, I'd much rather get out there and try to make change in the short life I have and fail doing it than for me to have never tried to do that at all.
Today on the Magnify Your Message podcast, I am sitting down with Mike Kaeding, the CEO of Norhart. Now, Mike has a bold mission to solve America's housing shortage and affordability crisis. Now, here's the catch. A lot of people have bold missions, but Mike is actually doing it. He is transforming the way that apartments are built and managed by incorporating technologies and efficiencies that have revolutionized other industries. It's an amazing story. Mike took over the family business back in 2014 when his dad suddenly, unexpectedly passed away. And Mike had no notion of, just business as usual and the way things are done in real estate. So he just started out by solving problems. And that was the magic. So, look, if you're committed to fulfilling on a big, bold mission in life, or if you're inspired listening to stories of others who are doing the same, then you got to check out today's episode. Prepare to be inspired. Today's guest is going to do exactly that. I'm really delighted and honored to introduce you to Mike Kaeding. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Share with people, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, I'm Mike and I'm the CEO of Norhart. We build and manage apartments, but we're really focused on driving down the cost of housing. Historically, we've been able to achieve about a 20 to 30% reduction in those costs. But imagine what that means. That means someday your rent or your mortgage payment could be half. And that's our dream.
That that sounds like the dream of every person. How on earth did you not only come up with the dream, but start putting it into action in the real world ways that you are?
You know, starting it off was sort of a bumpy journey. My parents originally started this business. It was very small. In fact, my growing up, we lost everything. And my dad was actually kidnapped in Peru. Totally crazy side story. But eventually I went off to college. And the one thing that I knew more than anything else is that I wanted nothing to do with the family business. And what I realized deep down, though, is that I just wanted to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact. And the reason I didn't want anything to do with the family business is I didn't want people to think it was given to me. So I really wrestled with my own ego for quite a while. And eventually I decided to jump in because I wanted to have that impact. And I realized putting my ego aside, I could have that impact by taking this small business and growing it to something much larger. So I jumped in full throttle, and my dad and I built two buildings together. It was great fun. And we about doubled the size of the company. And then one day, my dad suddenly and unexpectedly passed away. It totally shaped my world. It was a really rough time period. But at that point, I took on the company entirely, and we've grown a lot since then.
Boy, there are so many things in what you've said. I'm sorry about the way that your father passed. I lost my mother similarly, sudden and unexpected, and it was also a very challenging time.
Mm.
And I can only imagine your father must have been very legacy minded to have the vision and the dream that he had. And I like to imagine that he's there smiling on, watching the impact that you're making now as his
Oh,
legacy, and now
absolutely.
your own for your kids. S-
Yeah.
mm. So you jumped in full throttle after having and sworn up and down you would not get involved. And what are some of the first things that won you over to doing this work once you did?
I think it goes back to that impact. Since my dad died relatively young, it really reminded me how short life really is, right? We only live about 10,000 or 5,000 weeks here on this earth. And I want to be careful about how I spend every minute of that time. And so for me, so much of it is around not only just my family, building that relationship with my wife and kids, but also making some kind of meaningful, positive impact on the short time I have here on earth. And so what started winning me over was realizing that I could have that impact. Because when you look at the world of construction, it's been stagnant for over 60 years. In fact, if you look at other industries like manufacturing, they've improved labor productivity by 760%. But during that same time period, construction's done virtually nothing, growing at a simple 10% over 60 years. So I started realizing we could take the insights learned from these other industries and apply it to our own to have these kind of meaningful impact in the world of construction and housing that could improve people's lives.
Well, how specifically did you apply those insights that you were getting from other industries like manufacturing, Mike?
Yeah. So if you think about how construction is done, you typically have different companies coming together to work on one building. If a construction company were to produce a car, you'd have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheel. And of course, the wheel company, they would call you up and say they got delayed on another project and they can't get out to your site for another 2 weeks. You'd be entirely shut down. See, the world of manufacturing looks at us and says, you're crazy for doing it that way. And we respond with, this is the way it's always been done. But that's not good enough. And so we started bringing all those trades under one roof. And once we did that, that unlocked the ability to build out this manufacturing system for construction. Let me give you one example of that. So we stole this crazy innovative idea from manufacturing called the assembly line. I know, radical, right? But how in the world could you take a building and drive it down a line? Well, you can't. But what you can do is you can take the person and move them through the building. So what we do is about every 5 hours, each team shifts through the building by one unit. If you look at the end of our building, about every 5 hours, we have a brand new apartment unit completed. And that one technique alone helps drive down the time of a project from maybe 16 months down to 9.
Wow. I think one of the most vexing issues around constructions or remodels, any of that, is the insanity and unpredictability of the timeline. I was just on a flight and I was listening to a comic and he was talking about, oh, suddenly I can't think of his name, Nate Bargatze. And he was talking about, he said, he was gonna have some construction work done at his house, and the contractor, whomever it was, came, ripped out a big portion of his front fence, set a porta potty there, and then left for 2 months, and and he's saying his neighbors are like, what are you doing here? Like, it's this massive eyesore. And he said, if I wanted to have a contracting company come in, rip out half of my fence, stick up a porta potty and leave, I couldn't even hire that job out. I'm doing this joke, no justice. But it's so pervasive how broken the system of current builds and remodels and all of that, that comics are talking about it. I mean, it's got to be in the culture, in the zeitgeist for that to be the case. What are people saying when you do this? Sometimes innovators are ridiculed, are looked at like it's folly what they're doing rather than being recognized for being at the front end of the bell curve. What do people say when you do this?
There's so many different responses. So there are people who are get excited by the idea, right? But there's others that say it can never be done. This is really challenging. It's very hard work. And they're all kind of right, right? Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to build the system that builds that car. The same is true about construction. It's hard to build a one building and bring people together to do that, but it's so much harder. Oh my gosh, I got so many skin knees over this, but it is so much harder to build out a system that actually performs that at scale and effectively. And so I think I think the biggest pushback we get is about building out that system and the challenge to actually do that. But even if I fail, I'd much rather get out there and try to make change in the short life I have and fail doing it than for me to have never tried to do that at all.
You are so inspiring. It's that right there is the credo for life that anybody who makes a difference holds dear.
Mm.
So break it down to and share with us what are some of the things you're actually accomplishing? I mean, you've shared how you cut into a fraction of the time, manufacturing homes into a fraction of the time. What is this providing for people? What are some of the great things that you're providing?
Yeah. Can I mention one thing on what you just said?
Anything.
Yeah. There was something you pointed out really interesting is how the most successful people look at life. And I've had a chance of meeting billionaires and some of the most successful people here on this earth. And there is something that distinguishes those who truly make a world level impact from those who live an average life. And that is this willingness to get out and fail, right? There's something about all of us that fears failure in a deep way. But as a kid, we're not so much afraid of it, right? We can't walk, we can't talk, we can't ride a bike, but that's not a big deal. But once we get out there in the real world and grow up, we have this hesitation to get out and try things. But what I find is that the ones that make the impact are the ones that just get out there and fail and try again. Failure is part of that process. But as far as us actually in the field and what's happening, I think there's so many pieces to that puzzle. I mean, one interesting thing is that we have a partnership with Toyota. Toyota invented this world of lean manufacturing. It's this system of manufacturing to reduce costs and improve quality of what they're doing. We looked and said, who in the world is doing this the best? So Toyota is. Let's meet up with them, pull their insight, get their executives to come out here and actually build this up so that we can learn from what they're doing. Other little things, another example is we actually go as deep as wall panel manufacturing, precast concrete, giant beams and columns. We have a sourcing and supply chain. We have international employees. And we have architecture and engineering in-house. In the world of architects and engineers, they are traditionally incentivized to provide you the set of plans that meet code, but are the least amount of time and energy they have to put into it. That's not the most efficient, effective design. So we decided to bring that all in-house. And our engineers focus on how do we design a product that can be produced efficiently. Yes, that costs more on the front end from the architects and engineers, but it is far cheaper in the long run because we get down to like dissertation level work on joists and how to optimize that just right to improve the style of building we're doing.
It's it's amazing that you got some of these people who usually work independently to come in-house in this way. What got them on board? Is it that you're doing something so revolutionary? Is it in a world like where oftentimes these people are, it's kind of ego-driven careers, and rightfully so. I mean, architects and designers and things like this. How did you bring them all in-house?
One of the most important lessons I've learned is to hire the very best people. And when I say the best, I truly mean the best. We've had people work here, for example, one guy who in 2007, Steve Jobs announces the brand new iPhone. Steve Jobs walks off that stage, and our employee walked on that same stage following Steve Jobs' announcement. And see, these people change things. They make things happen that you didn't even know were possible. But one of the most important things, once you start doing that, is you create this pocket, this group of really top talent. And once you start doing that, that becomes super attractive. And so when I talk about like engineers and architects, our head engineer is probably, I mean, take this with a grain of salt because it's coming from me, but I honestly think he's probably the top engineer in the entire country when it comes to this kind of work. And when you have someone of that caliber, and then he's got great architects and other people now working with him, that team's phenomenal, right? But because you've built out that right group, that becomes self-fulfilling. And then there's a lot of other things to do on top of that. For example, we built out an entire recruiting team because we realized the best people are real. I mean, this is pretty explanatory, but like you have to realize it. But the best people are not looking for jobs. So if you want that great of a team, you need to proactively go out there and find them. So we built out a recruiting team to go do that. But on top of that, we got some databases and we identified everyone in our market that had the skills that we needed. And we did some simple math and said, okay, if we only want the top like 0.1%, there's only a pool of a couple 100,000 of these people. That means there's only about 10 that we're willing to accept into our company. We need to proactively go out there and identify that 10,000 and start whittling that down of people that are not even looking to come work here. So you just have to totally change the way you think about the world.
Right. It's a very different way of running a business than, hey, who's out there looking right now? So I want to change gears slightly. I'm some of the most empowering news segments that you've done have been about educating the public on things they can do to drive down their housing costs right now. Do you mind
Mhm.
if we take a jump over into that?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
particularly today with the way the economy is going and inflation on the nonstop rise, I think people are really interested in how they can adjust something that seems so fixed and immutable, like rent costs and housing costs. Would you please illuminate us?
Absolutely. So there's a few interesting tips, and I'll give you some special tips too that really apply in today's market
Ooh.
that not many people realize. But some simpler ones is to identify nicer, newer buildings. And the reason you want to do this is because these newer buildings have a lot of vacancy. And what you can do is you can come in and offer to move into their units, but you need some kind of discount. And the way to negotiate this is not to negotiate less on the rent. Rather, you want to offer or ask for 2 or maybe 3 or maybe more months of free rent. And the reason this is beneficial and the reason it works so well is because a lot of these property managers are managed uh, on a couple of factors, and that's the amount of vacancy they have, and also just what is the rental level. But many of these owners don't look at the fact that they're giving out incentives or they care less about the incentives. So because of this weird structure, you can actually get more out of these 3 months of rent than you can get in asking for lower rental rates.
It's so counterintuitive on
Yeah.
2 counts. 1, going for a new building when you would think, "Oh, some dilapidated old thing would would be more affordable." That's brilliant. And then they're keeping an eye on what is the rent level, not what is the incentive. Brilliant. Keep going.
Yeah. Another thing is to think about lease renewal. So a lot of times upon lease renewal, uh, landlords won't lower your rent and they'll always give you some kind of increase. And this actually happens in down markets. So there's even markets today where rents are actually coming down a little bit in the market. Lease renewal, they're not going to lower that rent for you. So what do you need to do? You need to make it clear that you're going to be moving out. And if you can get the landlord to believe you're going to move out, they're going to offer you a discount to keep you around. Why is that? From the landlord's perspective, it's expensive to fill that unit again, right? There's costs and turnover. They've got to do marketing. They've got to show the apartment and get people to move in. So a lot of these properties are very proactive about trying to keep you around if the key is if they believe you're going to move out. But if they don't, if they think you're just going to stay there, they think they got you and they'll lock you in place.
How do you have that not backfire? And them say, "Oh, sayonara. Here's a"
Well, one of the things is you don't officially move out till you give your official written move out notice. So if you really want to play the game at kind of a challenging or risky level, give them that move out notice and then offer that to stay if they make some concessions. But I'd say for most people, just have the dialogue. Say, hey, rental rates, this market today, I can go across the street, it's gonna be a lower rent, or I'm planning to move. I'm willing to stay if you're willing to do something for me. And a lot of times that's all you need to do to get the kind of discount you're looking for.
Got it. These are so helpful. What else, Mike, is there that we should know about the housing market, but most people do not? You're
Yeah.
so good at all these counterintuitive things. I'm sure you've got more.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So what's interesting right now in today's market is that the number of new apartment buildings that are starting construction has dropped tremendously. In fact, it's dropped by about 70 to 90%, depending on the market. But what we're seeing in today's market is you're not seeing the impact of that. And the reason that is we had this giant backlog of apartment buildings that were coming online. They are still coming online. We're still getting new deliveries. And because of that, rental rates have stayed mostly flat over the last couple of years since COVID. What's going to be happening because of this low amount of new starts, deliveries, a number of new buildings coming on the market is going to start falling. And it's already starting to happen. So over the next year, that's probably most likely going to be happening. As those buildings don't come on market because the lack of supply and consistent demand, we're expecting rental rates to rise. So if you know this secret in the market that many people don't understand is going on, there's steps you can do to protect yourself. And what I recommend to people right now is as your lease comes up for renewal over the next few months or the next year, don't just lock in a 1-year lease. Go back to your landlord and offer them a 2 or a 3-year lease if you're willing to stay there for the next couple of years. Most landlords or most leasing agents aren't going to think twice about it. They're going to say, that sounds amazing. I get another lease and I just lock in place. But you, because now you know this knowledge, you're actually protecting yourself because as this lack of supply starts hitting the market and rental rates start climbing, you'll have locked in today's lower rental rates.
So the re-upping the lease is predicated upon the fact that it stays the same over that year or successive year period.
Yeah, if you
Very
lock in a 3-year
Mhm.
term, your rental rate cannot be changed for that entire 3 years.
Understood. Wow, this is so good. No wonder you are always sought out for your insight and expertise on what's happening in housing markets all across the nation.
Mm.
What else would you like to share with us today that you think can impact people and make a positive benefit in their lives?
Yeah. You know, I can go back a little bit to the lesson we talked about earlier. When it comes to business, the number one most important lesson I've ever learned is about hiring the best people. But I didn't really explain why. And the reason why that is the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to even 10 times as much. It's not something most people understand, but I have seen it play out. I've seen what amazing teams can do, and they perform at a level that's so far beyond the average that it makes a huge impact for your business. Most business leaders, or a lot of business leaders, don't think that deeply about it. They look at it and say, what does this person cost me? And so they optimize for sort of the average salary, maybe trying to get a little bit lower of a salary. But that's exactly the wrong approach. And the reason that is because these high performing people, because they perform so much higher on a cost per unit produced, are actually your least expensive hires. So for those who feel that they can't afford to hire the best, my simple response to that is you can't afford not to, and it will completely change your business forever.
It is obvious as soon as you say that,
Mm,
that you who optimizes productivity and maximizes output would recognize that. That's incredibly helpful. Thank you.
yeah.
Mike, before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you'd like to provide for people today?
I can give one more interesting insight.
Please.
uh, so we touched a little bit on this earlier, but there's this interesting study that I saw recently, and it showed it took two groups of people. The first group was told just to make a nice clay pot. Okay, just make one nice clay pot, the best job you can. The second group of people were told to make as many clay pots as they could. And what the researchers were looking to find out is which group produced the best clay pot, the one that was told to make a bunch or the one that was told to make the perfect one. You might think it would be the perfect clay pot, but to their
Right.
surprise, it was the group that was told to make mini. And the reason is their first clay pots weren't that good, but they got in there, they failed, they tried again, they failed, tried again, it kept working until their later clay pots were actually far better than the first. And so when I hear people, I think there's so many of us, and myself included, that just hate to jump into something until we know we're good at it. And we talked about being on the news. Like that was how I felt too, like being on TV and on podcasts. But there's no doubt in my mind, now I've gone through it, and this experience holds for so many different cases. You just have to get out there, try. You will try and you will fail. And so many of us think that that's the end, where we failed and therefore we are a failure. That's just not the case. Failure is a requirement on the journey to success. You have to fail and fail and fail and fail till eventually you figure it out and then you succeed.
That iteration, like you talked about with the clay pots, finding what works, what doesn't. It is, man, if we could all truly take to heart that the path to mastery is through the failures, not around them, not despite them, but through that and the iterative process that it takes to gain mastery is paved upon a road of failure. You're blowing my mind. This is so good. And it's
Yeah.
I can imagine it in manufacturing. Okay, this isn't working. This isn't working. This is working. This is now what, how do we optimize? How do we Wow, this conversation is so much deeper than I anticipated, and yet everything I've come to expect from any conversation with you. It's so
Mm,
value packed and inspiring. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing your insight and your heart.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. How can people learn more about you, about Norhart, about the work that you do?
Yeah, the best way is simply to visit our website. That's norhart.com, norhart.com. And there you can see everything from our shows to our investment opportunities to just more about our business.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that the link is in the liner notes of the episode. Mike, what a delight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a ton of fun.
Thanks for being here with us today. I hope you were as uplifted and inspired by Mike's story as I was. Join us next time as I bring to you somebody who is making a big difference, being a disruptor in their field, and positively contributing their life's work and their message to the world. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with everyone that you feel it would benefit. Thank you in advance. And when you're ready to share your story and your work with the world, I can help. Visit CherylHunter.com to learn how. I am Cheryl Hunter, and until next time, know that your message has the power to change the world.